Good afternoon. Welcome to today's Inflation Reduction Act workshop. My name is Angela Xu, and I am the Municipal Engagement Manager with the Illinois Environmental Council. Before we begin, I want to say a quick thank you to all of our guest speakers today for sharing your expertise, and also thank you to our collaborators. And I'm going to go over some housekeeping. Attendees are automatically muted upon entry to the webinar. Because we have so many speakers, we will do just a really brief 1-minute moderated question answer session following each presentation. We'll also do a longer Q&A at the very end of the program. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat. This event will share a lot of information, but please rest assured that a recording will be shared with you. So next, I will pass it over to Chelsea Biggs to share a little bit about IEC.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks, Angela, for wrangling the group together for this presentation today. As Angela said, my name is Chelsea Biggs. I'm the Chief of Staff at the Illinois Environmental Council. Really, really happy to have you all here today, bringing together our partners and public officials in Illinois. You can go to the next slide. Before we dive into the real content of the webinar today, we just want to lay a little foundation for who IEC is, who LCV is, to give some context there. So IEC has been around since 1975, but we've really grown substantially in the last 10 years or so. Our goal is to build power for people and the environment. We represent more than 130 environmental organizations across Illinois, really with the goal to create healthy environments for our state. We do that through collaboration, power building, and advocacy, and I'll share a little bit more about that in the next couple slides. IEC is a state partner for the League of Conservation Voters. LCV is a national advocacy organization that focuses on influencing policy, holding politicians accountable, and winning elections, all in order to create safe and healthy communities. So they're a funder of IEC. They provide technical assistance and support our growth in the state. And we're tremendously grateful for their support. And they've also funded this work for us too. So in all transparency there, you can go to the next slide. IEC focuses on 6 issue areas when it comes to the environment. We look at sustainable agriculture, conservation, clean energy, equitable transportation, clean water, and zero waste. As I know many of you are thinking, a lot of these things intersect and connect. We're really fortunate to have an amazing team that works closely together. We have policy and program staff that specialize in each of these issue areas. And our approach is building coalition with the folks that are real experts on the ground doing this work throughout Illinois, to understand where the problems are, where there are issues, where things are going well, so that we can then provide education to our legislators and public officials. And we also write policy at the state level and at the city level in Chicago, and we push and lobby that legislation as well. Go to the next slide. So I mentioned we have affiliates throughout the state of Illinois. You might be wondering who they are. There's 130 of them, so way too many to list out and talk about. Some of our members are presenting today, so excited to have PRN on the line. You can also easily find a list of our members on our website if you're interested in who in your community is doing great work. All of our members vary in geographic scope, in size, and issue scope. So we ensure that we get the voices of everyone at the table, not just big enviro, but also community partners, environmental justice organizations, and folks of all sizes and issue areas. So we can go to the next slide. We can skip this one. We'll go to the next one. Sorry, Angela. And so before I turn it over to Angela to talk a little bit more about the Inflation Reduction Act and CEJA in Illinois, I just wanted to explain a little bit about why we're doing this work. We're funded through LCV to really provide information about the successes of IRA and ensure that IRA is successful. So we being Angela really, is building relationships with municipal leaders and stakeholders throughout the state, helping share knowledge about available funds and opportunities so that our state can continue to lead when it comes to protecting the environment. But we also want to share successes from municipalities as they're doing well and doing good work so that we can showcase that at the state and federal level. So I'll turn it over to Angela to talk a little bit more about these pieces of legislation that help us continue to lead.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. Yes, I completely agree with what you've been saying. And so I want to talk about why exactly are we gathered today to learn about the Inflation Reduction Act. And this because it's the largest investment in clean energy in United States history. And it is the most significant action our nation has taken on climate change. This gives money directly to the people. They are once in a generation federal investments projected to achieve up to 40% in climate pollution reduction by 2030. And so we're already seeing the positive impacts of these climate-friendly investments. And for example, we're already seeing across the country 271,000 good clean energy jobs. And of course, we cannot talk about the IRA without first mentioning CEJA, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, the most equitable clean energy jobs bill of its kind in the nation. IEC and our partners worked hard to get this legislation passed in 2021, and CEJA laid the groundwork and foundation to make federal funding opportunities possible in Illinois. So, for example, it set up the Illinois Climate Green Bank to apply for and receive funding on behalf of the state under the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, and also set up workforce hubs statewide with training programs funded by the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant. So these are several of the programs under the IRA, and our presenters today will share with you in detail what these programs are about. And so I really want to thank you all for tuning in today. We're so excited to share this information with you all. And now I'd like to pass the microphone over to Congressman Eric Sorensen. Thank you for joining us today, Congressman. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Angela. Really appreciate you. Want to welcome everyone here to the Inflation Reduction Act grant writing workshop. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to be here because it is going to take all of us working together to make sure that we're doing right by that next generation. And so I do want to thank the folks at LCV, League of Conservation Voters, the Prairie Rivers Network, the National Wildlife Federation for helping to put this together. And it's an honor not just to be here with you, but to be the only meteorologist in the United States Congress. My role is, quite simply to fight to make sure that our communities are sustainable, but also our way of life has to be sustainable. And one way that we can do this is fighting to bring back tax dollars to responsibly work for the next generation. I want to support communities, and we need to support businesses and infrastructure and protecting our environment at the same time. In last Congress, we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which created those incredible new programs that are specifically designed to help out with clean energy and agriculture conservation and even sustainable manufacturing. And one of those is Renewable Energy for America program. Everything in the federal government has a shortened thing. It's a REAP grant, REAP, Renewable Energy of America program. I think I got that right. And today we have one of those REAP grant recipients. Joel Siebold is here in this Zoom today. So Joel, I wanted to thank you for being here. Joel received more than $30,000 to install a solar array to help power his farm. I think it's a 20 kilowatt solar array. And so it's really incredible because this will allow him to be able to sustain himself on his farm, but do what's right. It's clean energy. But then also, in the case of getting the worst of the weather, right, he is going to be able to sustain his operation. Because of this funding also, he is going to save $3,200. And that is enough to power 2 different homes. And so this is just one example of one of those impacts that these types of grants are going to have. But just because of the funding is set aside in the IRA doesn't mean that it's always going to end up where we need it to. And so that's where every one of you comes in here today. We need people to submit their applications. And then when we need a nudge, it is having the only meteorologist in Congress be able to write a letter on support on behalf of your grant application. And so it really does turn out that the pen is mightier than the sword, but also it's going to take us all working together. And so in 2023, these grants total $350 million. an investment in our communities. These are investments in our future. It's a lot of money that is going to help people, which is exactly why it is so important that we work together here today. And so, and honestly, you're doing the work that we need done. When you think about doing this work, think about the benefit it's going to have on your kids and your grandkids way down the line. I like to think every day when I get up and I have the honor of being a member of the United States House of Representatives, what am I doing today that is going to have that positive impact on the next generation, right? And if I'm the only meteorologist there right now, what are we able to do today to move us forward in a way that is going to be beneficial for our kids? So I encourage you, take notes today, ask questions. Remember how essential this is. I wish that there were thousands of people in this Zoom call, but I'm thankful for all of you for taking the time to be here today. I think it may seem a little tedious, but I can tell you as a new member of Congress, grant writers are way more important than you think. You are more important than you think. And my office will have your back to make sure that we secure the funding we need. Because this is how we work together to make sure that our communities are places where we are going to be able to live, to work, to raise a family, and we're going to be better off because we're making the tough decisions together and we're fighting for one thing to make sure that we're making good, environmentally sound decisions. So thank you so much for being here, and for all of the organizations for really stepping up to make sure that we can do what's right today. So I'll turn it back over to Angela, but thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much.
Are we going to Mike? Angela, you can introduce Mike. It looks like, Mike, you are underneath the Great Centennial Bridge.
Thank you so much, Congressman. But yes, next we'll pass the microphone to Senator Halpin. Thank you for being here. Welcome, Senator.
So yes, Congressman, I'm underneath the Centennial Bridge, although I think from this angle, I think it looks like I'm sitting in Iowa, but I love looking at Illinois.
The weather is nicer where you are than it really is outside.
Thank you, Senator. So thanks, Angela. It's a privilege to be here today with all of you to discuss the impact of the Inflation Reduction Act, specifically as it relates to Illinois. As Angela mentioned, I'm Mike Halpin. I'm the state senator for Illinois' 36th district, which includes most of Rock Island County, as well as parts of Mercer, Henry, Knox, McDonough, and Warren counties. And so the Inflation Reduction Act is, I think, one of the most significant pieces of federal legislation that's obviously aimed at addressing inflation, but does so much more. And I know the focus today is going to be a little bit more on energy and the environment. But one thing that's near and dear to my heart is the effect of the Inflation Reduction Act on healthcare and the ability for it to lower healthcare costs for the people that live in the district I represent. Particularly the provisions to lower the price of medications, essential medications. When you combine what we've done in Illinois when it comes to capping the cost of insulin, inhalers, EpiPens, that directly puts money back in the pockets of people here in the 36th district. And that's extremely important to me. It's essential for those managing chronic conditions. The medications that we're talking about are life-saving, and the high costs that we've seen have been it's an economic burden on the family when they're trying to make various choices. Now, with the Inflation Reduction Act and the work we've done in Illinois, people aren't choosing between medication and food, medication and paying their rent, and they can continue to live more healthy lives. And it's extremely important. But going back to kind of the other goals of the Inflation Reduction Act, the purpose was to try to reduce the financial strain on American families while at the same time investing in the future of the country, particularly emphasizing transitioning to a cleaner economy. And that goal and that intent really dovetails with what we've done in Illinois back in 2021 with CEJA. The Inflation Reduction Act has provided critical funding for those clean energy initiatives, expanding wind, and solar projects across the state. Particularly here in Western Illinois, we've got solar projects that have expanded because of the federal tax incentives. And you combine that with what we've done for the state and our state incentives, it makes renewable energy more accessible to homeowners and small businesses. Um, Specifically through programs like Illinois Solar for All, we're making sure that lower income families in our area have the ability to benefit from these clean energy opportunities. And it's not always the problem we run into a lot is where some of these incentives go to big corporations that don't necessarily pass down the savings. These programs are actually helping people on the ground, low to moderate income people benefit on their utility bills and things like that. Um, as of 2 years ago, we had about almost 300,000 Illinois workers were employed in the energy sector, and over 84,000 of those workers were employed in energy efficiency. And because of this act, we're able to expand those opportunities. And we've brought in an estimated $18 billion of investment into large scale clean power generation and storage between now and 2030. And when you look at the business makeup of the state, we're home to 1.2 million small businesses, which represents about 99.6% of all businesses, and which employ about 45, just shy of 45% of all workers in the state. Because of the Inflation Reduction Act, those commercial building owners can receive a tax credit of up to $5 per square foot to support energy efficiency improvements, and which in turn then deliver lower utility bills. And other incentives include the 30% of the installation costs for solar power, as well as the purchasing clean trucks or vans for commercial use. And so the effects on our small businesses are notable. And again, we're talking small businesses and not just having these benefits go to larger corporations. When you combine that with the benefits to the agricultural sector, which is extremely important to the 36th district that I represent, but also throughout the state of Illinois, local farms and agricultural businesses here and in other rural areas can now access those federal incentives for installing solar panels, upgrading equipment, improving energy efficiency in the same manner that small businesses do, but particularly, I guess, adapted for the rural and the agricultural sector. It supports rural economic development, infrastructure investments, modernizing essential services, expanding broadband access to these areas where it's extremely necessary. Mercer County is one of the I think, least served areas in the state. And we're wanting to make sure that with this bill, we're able to get access there. Our rural communities need broadband just as much as some of the highly populated areas. So, all this together kind of really provides a path that Illinois has already been on for several years. And we're just very excited to have federal partners now with the Inflation Reduction Act to make this work. We're going to expand Illinois as a hub for clean energy innovation, economic growth, improved healthcare affordability, as I mentioned, and we're building a strong, sustainable future, ensuring every resident, small business owner, small farmer, family farmer feel the direct benefits of the legislation. And so I want to thank, our federal partners, Congressman Sorensen, our Illinois senators as well, in making sure that the monies from this bill are coming into Illinois. They're coming into the 36th district here in Western Illinois, and I'm looking forward to continuing working with all of you going forward, and excited to hear about the specific presentations we have today.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I am Nina Struth, and I am the River Health and Resiliency Organizer with Prairie Rivers Network. I am based in the Quad Cities area, and I'm really excited to talk to you a bit today, a little bit about a recently released report that's specific here to the Quad Cities region and was done in collaboration with the National Wildlife Federation and the University of Illinois Discovery Partners Institute. I'm really just going to briefly share with you some key points of the assessment, as well as ways the Quad Cities is hoping to utilize the assessment as a tool for funding nature-based solutions to help combat our localized climate risks. Next slide, please. So if you're not familiar with the Quad Cities, some people aren't, we are a bi-state region. So while I am based on the Illinois side, mainly in Rock Island, our work spans throughout the Quad Cities region. So we're located right on Illinois and Iowa, where that river runs east to west. And funnily enough, it's not just 4 cities. So it's actually 5 cities. Although if you asked Quad City residents, we'd probably tell you there's a lot more cities that are actually included in that region. But to give you a little bit of background on the assessment, in the summer of 2023, the National Wildlife Federation initiated a climate and vulnerability assessment here in the Quad Cities to serve as a resource and tool to advance future conversations around natural infrastructure and resilience. I think it's always important to note when I talk about this at the beginning that it is not meant to be a plan. It's not a prescriptive plan, but it's rather a community-driven product to help guide the process to implement more natural infrastructure within the Quad Cities region and to help combat those climate risks. Next slide, please. So this graphic here just gives you a little bit of an insight in terms of the essential components that comprise the current assessment. And I do know that was included, a link to it is included in the chat. It is a pretty hefty document. So if you just want a really nice quick overview, we do have a link also on that website to the executive summary as well. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, this assessment was really designed to better understand the local impacts here in the Quad Cities. So we have, the reports from a climate risk standpoint, looking at Iowa and Illinois from a broader sense, but we were able to utilize more downscaling of climate models to really help simulate and project future risks and impacts under different hypothetical scenarios. Quad City stakeholders and community members were engaged throughout this entire process to really provide that local insight on climate issues, opportunities, and needs, and also helping to align the climate assessment with the regional interests. Next slide, please. This here is our community identified climate risks. You can see there's a variety of them pictured here, but really, of course, taking a look at that flooding as being one of the top concerns, as well as extreme weather and extreme heat following those. And based off of these climate risks, we have then again worked with our other partner, the Discovery Partners Institute, to take a look at what climate modeling could potentially look like for some of these risks. Next slide, please. So within our assessment, we have 3 different versions of the map that you see here. We have early century, mid-century, and end of century mapping that takes a look at what the potential climate risks are for flooding for the Quad Cities region. Really what we could potentially see is that flooding as we experience it here in the Quad Cities will change. Heavy rainfall that is expected to rise in the region could potentially lead to flooding in different areas of the Quad Cities, and it will vary from city to city. I also like to make a note here too that the flooding is not necessarily coming from the river flooding. There will be potentially flooding coming from those rivers, but then also a lot of that yellow that you see there, which is that 0.5 to 1 foot of standing water, could simply be from runoff. It could be from, opportunities where flash flooding is occurring as well. So while these maps do kind of capture what that standing water looks like, it is important to note that it's not necessarily all coming from the rivers that kind of surround the Quad Cities. So as a result, there is the opportunity to see some of these downstream areas really experience flooding that haven't seen flooding before. And actually, as we go into the next slide, you'll kind of see the differences between early, and I just included end of century here. And so really what we notice here is that extent increasing. So areas that maybe have not flooded in the past, potentially flooding. So more instances of that yellow 0.5 to 1 foot of standing water, but then additionally seeing an increase in the depth in other places as well. So more of that blue coming apart. Big things to note too here, aside from places that have not flooded in the past, potentially flooding in the future, also the effects that could occur to our infrastructure. We are a bi-state region, as I mentioned, so really being very aware that that could also potentially affect the infrastructure that connects us, the several bridges that we see throughout our region. Next slide, please. We also took a look at extreme heat as well. We know that both extreme heat and cold can negatively impact our social and natural systems. And actually, extremely hot days are the leading cause of weather-related fatalities in the United States and contribute to both poor public health and economic stress. What we see here in the Quad Cities potentially as climate change continues is that we are expected to see more hot days where those temperatures get above 95 degrees Fahrenheit and extremely hot days when our temperatures go above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Right now, we experience about 3 days over the temperatures of 95 degrees. And if we continue to go on this trajectory, we could see anywhere up to close to 2 months of those temperatures in the summer months. Next slide, please. Now, I mentioned this is not a doom and gloom report. We talk a lot about the resilience aspect of it and really we're intending to inspire that community-wide support and understanding and not discourage from resilience planning. The findings are not static, and the climate risks that we are projecting based on the path that we are on right now. But we have the power to change that trajectory by changing the way we develop in the future in a way that is in sync with our natural features and make investments to protect and strengthen these features. Next slide, please. This is where our nature-based solutions comes into play and our focus for this assessment. Nature-based solutions are designed to conserve, restore ecosystems or mimic natural systems and are actually cost-effective solutions for mitigating these natural hazards. And then additionally, they provide social, economic, and environmental benefits too. So there's a lot of momentum and movement here in the Quad Cities to look at nature-based solutions as ways to combat these climate risks, but also really making sure we're taking into account the implementation on a scale, location, and community needs and desired based as well. So that's why we continue to really talk with our community members and see what their needs really are. Next slide, please. And so we cannot rely on just our current business as usual way of doing things. Our planning needs to be more forward-looking and to reflect these climate-induced impacts and future changes, especially as it pertains to urbanization. So in the second part of our assessment, we are partners with the Discovery Partners Institute, brought back the climate modeling here. So the map that you see on the top is the map you saw earlier for the early century. And on the bottom here, our analysis takes a look at what that flood risk could look like with the implementation of site-specific nature-based solutions. So here we're talking about nature-based solutions that specifically help to harness that high levels of storm water that we are seeing now in those higher instances of precipitation events. So things like green roofs, rain gardens, permeable pavements, ways that really help to capture and help make sure that that rainwater infiltrates into the ground instead of just running off. And what we have found is that you can see a very significant reduction in that peak flow discharge and infiltration as well into the ground when these nature-based solutions are implemented. Next slide, please. Here's another example of nature-based solutions impacting the effects of climate change. So on the graph to the left, you can see the number of alarming events predicted for each decade through the century in the Quad Cities. And on the graph on the right, you can see how the implementation of these nature-based solutions could drastically impact the numbers of alarming flood events for some of the Quad Cities. Next slide, please. As I mentioned previously throughout this assessment and still ongoing in the work we're doing now, Quad Cities stakeholders have been engaged from the get-go. So really to understand the regional needs and opportunities, and now really to discover what potential projects are on the horizon or being brainstormed and where there could be the opportunity for further assistance. And so through these conversations, what we found to be pretty consistent in terms of the necessity for advancing this regional resilience includes education, research, and funding. So we need more opportunities for educating about nature-based solutions and the benefits that they can have, as well as research to help support this. A lot of times the numbers are what count the most especially when we're looking at it from a funding perspective or talking to people who are in, more higher levels of power. And so looking at ways that we can be able to fund opportunities for that too. And of course, funding. Funding comes up very, very consistently in our conversations of being able to fund the work or the capacity to really get these projects lifted up off the ground and be something that provides that long-lasting benefit as well. As I mentioned, we don't have a prescriptive plan with this assessment. Really, a lot of this work involves bringing these stakeholders that we have talked to together to understand how we can utilize these opportunities in the future. I'm going to pass it along now with the next slide here to one of my colleagues with the National Wildlife Federation. Atab, if you'd like to take over this next slide and a little bit of the funding database, I'll pass it over to you briefly.
Awesome. Thank you, Nina. And thanks everyone for being here today. I'm Mahtab Bagarzada with the National Wildlife Federation. I'm our Senior Program Manager for our Mississippi River program, where we are working to advance nature-based solutions along the 10 main stem states of the basin. And we do that through federal policy, as well as outreach and organizing and communications and storytelling. So one of the tools that we have highlighted here is our nature-based solutions funding database. It essentially compiles all federal funding sources related to nature-based solutions, whether that's technical assistance programs or grants or loans. Our staff have gone through and read through the request for proposals, the notice of funding opportunities, and really taken out all the key information that we feel is useful for making those decisions, whether a funding program is relevant or feasible for you to pursue. And I know this workshop is our Inflation Reduction Act focused, but we also have taken programs that were created or supplemented by the bipartisan infrastructure law. And so with these two big pieces of funding legislation in mind, we really wanted to highlight the number of opportunities that are available to fund nature-based practices and projects. And the way that we've set it up, and I'll actually share my screen momentarily, it's set up so that you can tailor your project needs and capacity to find the right or the best fitting program. And so I think really the best way to do this is just to quickly share my screen, if I can do that, and just do a really quick walkthrough. And I know Angela put the link in the chat, which I do appreciate. So hopefully you're seeing my screen right now. Once you get here, it just kind of takes you right into the meat and potatoes of it. This is our filter bar here that allows you to tailor, your search to whatever particular project that you're working on or interested in. And we're hoping that with this kind of level, you can just tailor it to what you need. So for example, cost share is fairly continual barrier to receiving federal funding. And if that is something that's a barrier for you or a community that you're working with, you can filter for that and find programs that don't require that, or maybe have a sliding scale depending on the community that you're working with or in. And so that's one of the main functions of the database. The second one, and I'm just going to go ahead and click into one of these programs here. And you'll see it just gives you really high level overview of the program so you can really make that decision, is this the right fit for me? Can I pursue this? And down here, we have, these are all hyperlinked tags that we call them. And so, disaster recovery is on the minds of many right now. And if you click in, you can see some related funding programs. And that's kind of the second primary function of this tool, is to help highlight funding programs that you might not necessarily readily think of. For example, folks might not go to, these are these are mostly EPA and then FEMA programs, it looks like, but we have opportunities from Department of Transportation, for example, which folks might not think of, right away as a possible funding pot. And so we also have a search function here, if you want to look for something specific, like if you want for like rural assistance, you can do that as well. And as always, if there's anything missing or the tool could be better, made better in any way, we're all ears. We're actually about to release an update in the next month or so, and that'll include case studies of actual projects on the ground and how they've navigated applying for these federal funding pots. Hoping to bring that, like pull the curtain back a little bit and show, this is how much it costs to even just put an application together, or these are the steps that we took. As well, we'll have tags. So you'll see highlighted programs if they've received funding or were created by either the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law or the Inflation Reduction Act. And so hoping to compile those funding opportunities and really like spotlight them. All right, back to you, Nina.
Thank you for that, Matab. And I'm just going to end here really with, because I think it's important a lot of times to talk about the next steps. Oftentimes reports and such get done, and then we don't really see what happens as an outcome from that. And so our next steps really involve these three C's. We are continuing to have conversations and share opportunities, find opportunities to share the assessment through different venues, really looking to engage further in conversations with our vulnerable communities as identified in the assessment as well. Looking for ways to collaborate. We're utilizing and leveraging this assessment as a way to advance that climate resilience in the region, whether it is through nature-based solutions and finding those potential funding opportunities too, and then providing that connection. A lot of times these funding opportunities tend to be a lot more feasible when we bring certain people to the table or more people to the table as well. So really helping to try and contribute to that organized community to help support our region's resilience and hopefully see some of these climate risks go down instead of going up in the future.
Thanks, Angela. So my name is Amanda Pancaw, and I am the Director of Energy and Community Resiliency at Prairie Rivers Network. So in addition to our coworker Nina's climate work in the Quad Cities, Prairie Rivers Network is also working with communities across Illinois to navigate the energy transition and to take advantage of clean energy opportunities. Next slide. So today, Randa and I are going to share information about specific energy programs and success stories coming from the Inflation Reduction Act and other state and federal laws. And then I'm going to hand it over to Randa, and she's going to talk specifically about some technical assistance opportunities that are available to help particularly rural, disadvantaged, and coal communities navigate the energy transition and these opportunities. Next slide. So our introductory speakers already highlighted a lot of the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act that passed Congress in 2022. And as they mentioned, there are a few other things to look at. So if you want to go ahead and click the next two slides, Angela. So in 2021, Illinois passed the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. We heard a little bit of this from Senator Halpin. We call this CEJA, and it created clean energy incentives and energy efficiency programs, clean workforce hubs across the state, and more. And then just a month after CEJA passed, Congress passed the bipartisan infrastructure law. that also invested in pollution cleanup and clean energy. And then it was less than a year later that Congress passed the Inflation Reduction Act. So these three laws are really working together to help people, communities, businesses save on energy bills, create jobs, make homes and businesses more energy efficient, spur U.S. manufacturing, and lower greenhouse gas emissions. So Illinois really is poised to benefit more from these two federal laws because of the groundwork that we laid with CEJA. And so you're going to hear me talk about opportunities from all three of these laws today and how many of these incentives and programs can be stacked together. Next slide. But we are going to start with one of the big and lasting ways that the Inflation Reduction Act is driving investment in clean energy. So the IRA created and extended clean energy tax credits for consumers, businesses, communities, nonprofits, industry, and more. On this slide, you can see a graphic that shows all the tax credits that are available to consumers. So they include credits for solar, geothermal, weatherization, energy efficiency, electric vehicles, and more. If you at your home or business want to look into some of these, you can visit energy.gov/save, where you can learn about some of these opportunities. Next slide, or go ahead and click. It'll be the same slide, but more information is going to pop up here, and it's going to show us how those Inflation Reduction Act tax credits can then be paired with the renewable energy credits that CEJA created to help Illinois meet our renewable energy goals. These credits cover an additional 25 to 35% of solar project costs. So you can add those on to the solar tax credits. There's other energy programs from utilities and from state and federal governments that can help cover project costs. And one of the problems with tax credits is that they aren't often accessible to low-income folks who don't have a tax liability. So the Inflation Reduction Act also sought to remedy this by creating new energy rebates. So our Illinois Environmental Council's in charge of this IRA rebate program, and it's expected to roll out in early 2025. So I've also shared a website here where you can kind of get the latest on IEPA's plan for these energy rebates that are going to be targeted at low-income folks to help with energy efficiency in their homes. And I have a lot of hyperlinks on my slides, so we'll make sure that those get shared with you so you can revisit these as we move through things quickly today. Okay, so next slide. So another historic problem with tax credits is that if you were a tax-exempt entity, like a nonprofit, a school, a church, or a local unit of government, you can't get a tax credit. Well, this all changed also with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. So some of these clean energy tax credits are now available as direct payment to tax-exempt and government entities. You'll hear this called both direct pay and elective pay. I have heard people say that it's so good, we named it twice. So now tax-exempt entities like your village, city, township, county, your church, your school, they can own their own solar and access these tax credits for the first time. And again, for your local units of government, they can take advantage of these tax credits and of CEJA's renewable energy credits and other state and federal loans and grants. Next slide. So let's take a really quick look at some of the open and upcoming funding opportunities that we're excited to spread the word about and work with communities on. Right now, the Department of Energy has a grant open for clean energy projects in rural areas. Next up, the Great Lakes Thriving Community Environmental Justice Grant Making Program is going to open in the next couple of weeks, and it's going to provide funding for energy and environment projects in disadvantaged communities. The Illinois Finance Authority, which was designated as the Illinois Climate Bank by CEJA, allowing it to go after this federal, state, or federal energy and climate money. It has gotten a bunch of money to create an energy efficiency revolving loan fund that also should be set up any day now. And this program will provide low interest loans to finance energy projects for local units of government, schools, and more. And then moving on, the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant is another example of where Illinois went after federal money. We received $430 million that will be used to advance clean buildings, clean transportation, clean industry, and more. And the Illinois EPA and other state agencies will be administering this opportunity soon. The Clean School Bus Program has brought electric school buses to dozens of Illinois schools. Right now, the 2024 rebate program is open with applications due in early January. And the last thing I'm highlighting here is that right now the US EPA has their brownfield program open, and you can get funding to assess brownfields, to clean up brownfields. These are sites with known or suspected past contamination. Next slide. So those 6 opportunities are just kind of a snapshot of what's out there. And so you saw the kind of database to track natural climate solution funding. Here are some databases that you can use to track clean energy funding opportunities. And again, we'll make sure these slides get sent around so folks can look at these in more detail. And all of this, CEJA passed in 2021. We've had a few years now to see these types of projects going up in our neighborhoods and our communities. So I'm going to just run through a few slides to highlight some more innovative solar approaches that maybe you aren't quite familiar with yet. And after I do that, I'll hand it to Randa, and she's going to talk about some technical assistance opportunities that disadvantaged communities can access to start exploring some of these things. So next slide. So even with all of these incentives and programs, one exciting approach that we've seen a school in Rep. Sorensen's district take advantage of. Williamsfield School has been a really big leader in electric school buses. They have then taken a step further, and they got some federal funding along with 18 other schools to build microgrids. So to add solar, battery storage, use their electric school buses as battery, and develop microgrids. And so, adding battery storage to solar is something we're going to start seeing more and more of now. It's necessary to take into account that intermittent nature of solar. A microgrid refers to something that can be its own mini grid. Sometimes solar and battery storage is just connected to the grid as a whole. It doesn't have to be a microgrid, but that's an innovative approach and really exciting to see Illinois schools leading the way in some of these projects. Next slide. This is the one I was looking for. So even with all the incentives for solar, it doesn't always make sense for every location, every building to have solar. So community solar is an approach that allows ratepayers to subscribe to a solar farm that's built off-site. I'm not going to talk much more because I think we're going to get to hear from the mayor of Galesburg about how a community solar farm in their community has been really beneficial. Next slide. Another really exciting solar approach is, I mentioned the funding to clean up brownfields, sites that have known or suspected contamination. Once we get them cleaned up, they're a perfect place to put solar. The city of Urbana has built solar on their landfill, a site that didn't have much use other than being a grassy area that they had to mow. They now have a community solar farm for low-income people on the Urbana landfill. And there's special solar incentives for creating solar on brownfields in the state of Illinois. Another really innovative approach is agrivoltaics. I look forward to someday when this is a household word in Illinois. It is the idea of co-locating agriculture and solar, whether this is grazing animals or growing crops. Next slide. So agrivoltaics is an example of a dual use solar project. And another dual use would be growing pollinator friendly vegetation under a solar farm. And so especially for our larger projects, this makes a lot of sense. Not only are we producing energy, but we're increasing biodiversity, improving water quality, and improving the organic matter and structure of the soil. Next slide. So a couple other examples of dual use solar. I love this project that the Decatur Civic Center just did, where they put canopy solar in their parking lot. And then I'm talking with a lot of communities right now that are exploring floating solar on their water treatment plants. So that's just kind of several examples of really innovative projects that our communities are doing, that there are state and federal incentives and grants and loans to help them do. One more slide here, I think, from me. And then something else we really want to encourage communities to think about, particularly for utility scale projects. We're seeing solar projects, 500,000 plus acres that are going to be big tax revenue generators for communities. As those developers come to town and start talking with landowners and communities about these larger projects, we want to be thinking about what other community benefits can this project bring the community. So Department of Energy is actually requiring community benefit plans for all of their federal funding opportunities. So that requirement has really spurred this conversation. But even for projects that don't have DOE funding, community organizations, local units of government can be talking about what economic, social, environmental benefits they want to see from these big projects, and communicating with developers early on in the clean energy development timeline. And Randa is going to talk a little bit of technical assistance, and we just recently did a webinar on community benefits. One more slide from me. One thing Prairie Rivers Network loves to do is tell success stories. So you're going to hear more about the Renewable Energy for America program, that REAP grant that Representative Sorensen mentioned. Really exciting things happening, helping rural small businesses and ag producers in Illinois. And the more we can tell these success stories, the more we can ensure that this funding for these programs keeps coming, and the more we can inspire other people to take advantage. So if your community or your business has, you think, done something really exciting and you want to help tell your story, we can help get the word out with press releases, social media posts, things like that. So with that, I think I'm finally going to hand it to Randa to talk a little bit more about technical assistance for disadvantaged communities.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda, for taking the time to examine the policy and how they build off of each other and share those success stories of this historical funding opportunity. Next up, we will discuss how your community can request technical assistance through the regional TICTAC. So TICTAC stands for Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center. It's a long name, so we'll refer to it as TICTAC for the remainder of this presentation. There are six TICTACs nationwide, which are all funded through the Inflation Reduction Act and the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Energy. Although we try to support all of our intake requests, our work is focused primarily on communities that have not traditionally had the resources to apply for these federal grants. These TICTACs are part of the Biden administration's Justice 40 initiative, which aims to deliver 40% of benefits of certain federal investments to disadvantaged communities. These priority communities include rural and remote populations, as well as current and former minelands. And to the right, you can see the little red stars where all of these TICTACs are located. Next slide. Two TICTACs serve Region 5, which is our region, the Great Lakes TICTAC, hosted at the University of Minnesota, and the Environmental Justice TICTAC, hosted by Blacks and Green. Both TICTACs are responsible for serving all of Region 5, which includes Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, and of course, Illinois. Next slide. A large group of partners supports both of these organizations. Today, we're going to focus on the Great Lakes TICTAC. We are partnered with many of the organizations listed here, including the Environmental Protection Network, the University of Illinois Extension, and the Great Plains Institute, just to name a few. These organizations allow us to cover a wide range of topics and recruit subject matter experts to support applications outside of our own field. Next slide. The Great Lakes TICTAC can provide grant navigation support, such as identifying opportunities your community is eligible for and finding funding opportunities that would match your community's needs. We can help you identify and build a project budget. We can help you collaborate with local partners and build coalitions to support your community's needs. You can attend our workshops, webinars, and virtual training events. We currently have about 6 webinars uploaded to a YouTube playlist that you can watch to learn more about upcoming funding opportunities. We also have GIS specialists who can help build maps or analyze map data. And lastly, we can help with project design and scoping. Next slide. Here, you can find our recorded webinars on YouTube by searching Thriving Communities webinar series or through our Prairie Rivers TikTok landing page, which I'll include in the link. As I noted above, we have already had several funding opportunities showcased in these playlists. These include informational videos on the Great Lakes TikTok, the Community Change Grant, the Illinois Climate Bank, flooding and green infrastructure, water infrastructure funding, and even brownfield funding. And as Amanda said, we'll send these slides out so you can directly click that link or just do a search on YouTube. Next slide. If your community is interested in pursuing a funding opportunity or has a project that needs funding, we encourage you to fill out our intake form, visit our website, sign up for our newsletters, or even reach out by email. We would love to hear from you and help your community access these historical funding opportunities. Next slide. Additionally, there are other resources for technical assistance. These are a little bit more specific. So the Clean Energy to Communities, also known as the C2C program, connects local governments, electric utilities, community-based organizations, and other experts from across the Department of Energy's National Laboratory Complex to accelerate the deployment of clean energy systems that are reflective of local and regional priorities. IWG supports stakeholders with information and resources available to communities currently experiencing an energy transition. The DOE National Community Solar Partnership is a coalition of stakeholders working to expand access to affordable distribution solar to every U.S. household. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight on here was the local infrastructure hub boot camps. These are specifically designed to help municipalities with fewer than 150,000 residents working with local governments to apply for federal funding opportunities to improve the city's infrastructure. We have also a few links here to the Lawyers for Good Government, who offer an online tool called the Clean Energy Tax Navigator. Again, this is an interactive form that walks you through the process of determining the eligibility for direct pay. It offers its own technical assistance and in some cases, direct pro bono services. The Brownfield Technical Assistance Program, specifically for our region, is done through the KSU tab. They equip communities with the tools and resources needed to stimulate economy and community revitalization around brownfields. And then the last link we have here is for the EPA Land Revitalization Technical Assistance Program, which helps to remove those barriers we talked about to contaminated property redevelopment. Next slide. And there's our contact information. And with that, I will hand it back to Angela for any questions.
Thank you so much, Randa. I currently do not see questions in the chat, so I think we can keep going, but that was really important information, just echoing the importance of these technical assistance centers. If let's say you're running into capacity issues with writing grants, or you need help with planning an investment project, or even partnering with a community-based organization for your project, really highly recommend reaching out to them. They're really great. And Randa just popped in the chat a really awesome note. So thank you so much for presenting. And next up, I'm happy to pass the microphone to the Mayor of Galesburg, Peter Schwartzman. So Mayor, the floor is yours.
Obviously very accessible through email and phone and such. By the way, I teach at Knox College. That's my main job. I've been there for 27 years. I'm an environmental scientist with specialty in climate change and energy research. So it's exciting for me to share with you some of the things that have been going on in Galesburg. So we, as a city, in 2012, we put municipal energy aggregation in a referendum, and it was voted by the public very narrowly. It was like 2 or 3%, even though all the council and the mayor at the time supported it. And I think that goes to show the lack of education and information that's available to the general public on these issues. And that continues to this day. But that program started in 2013, and we've successfully negotiated 5 municipal aggregation agreements over that time. Now, I should also point out that during that time, we also purchased city power through such aggregation and had significant savings as well. Now, those 2 programs were actually, this was a decision the city council made to have our aggregated power be 100% green or renewable energy. And that was true for the first 10 years. And over the last couple of years, we've had to deviate from that, just given inflationary concerns. But the latest 3 years, 2021, not the full year, but partially into the contract, went all the way to 2024. Our rate for municipal electricity was 5.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Now that's a tremendous price. Current prices around the state are, in the 9-cent range. So the fact that we had that price for a 3-year period, we saved the residents of Galesburg over $8 million. That was from July 2021 to May 2024. And that's an average of about $600 per household. So that's a wonderful story, and we're glad to continue to participate in it. At the same time, we're also seeing, as was noted by an earlier speaker, we're seeing community solar projects. So a lot of solar projects are going up in our county, in our city. And many of them are community solar, so they allow for residents to join them or companies as well. And our school district, District 205, has been among the leading institutions in the state to do that. And if anyone, wants to connect with them, you should as well. Now, there have been some difficulties, of course. There's been a lot of shifts in energy markets in recent years. And so the last 2 years, we've seen dozens of companies walking door to door, direct calling, texting, and encouraging people to switch. This has created a lot of confusion and is been very problematic because some of these companies are legit and some of them are not. This has been a major challenge. Even with our aggregated power supply, given the state's laws, people could opt out of it. And there were times during the 10-year period of savings that we saw maybe even 30 to 40% of our community members opting out, even though most likely that was not advantageous to them economically. So this major challenge that we face in terms of education, we've created a FAQ on energy that I think is very, very informative. I can share, it's on our website. I can share with anyone who has interest. But it goes through and trying to educate people about different options and what they should look for and the kind of questions they should ask and so forth. We certainly believe our aggregational efforts have been very, very successful, both environmentally as well as economically. Now, in the most recent version, post 2024, we renegotiated aggregation, and our costs went from 5.5 cents per kilowatt hour to 8.7 cents per kilowatt hour, which is a 58% increase. Now, when we shared that increase with our community, they were very upset with us. And so, of course, they didn't necessarily thank us for the savings that we had provided them. But this was an inflationary period. We thought 8.7 cents per kilowatt hour was still very strong, and yet but the lack of information, it seemed to the residents, many of them, that we were spiking their prices at a very bad time, and that was not obviously our intention, but that was the way it played out. Additionally, we changed aggregation companies, and so the folks saw a different name on their bill, and that caused tremendous amounts of confusion as well, in light of all the other confusion going on. And so that's something that anyone who's willing to, wanting to switch over and do this should really keep in mind and prepare for. So I noted that our first 10 years were considered green energy, 100% renewable. We've shifted away from that. There was some other things that came through called no carbon, which I saw as more of a pro-nuclear project. But lo and behold, we are seeing opportunities to, one, aggregate with other cities, so multiple aggregation to get even a better price. So our city manager is working on that. We're also working on, obviously, other solar initiatives where we can purchase renewable energy directly from some of these solar arrays in our community. And that would probably be the best opportunity for us to invest local dollars and see their benefit. When we were doing the aggregation of renewable energy, that money was going outside of the state, as you well imagine. And so this is a way for all of us, I think, in the near future to make headway. I would also point out, I should have said from the get-go, and it's my closing thought, as my research indicates, we are in a position as a state to really move forward with renewable energy and on a nationwide basis. We have some great state policies that put money in there, as Congressman Sorensen pointed out, and those are likely to continue. We are at the forefront of making significant changes to protect our environment and provide jobs and protect health, as Senator Halpin pointed out. So let's do it, and let's invest, and let's also think about energy storage. We're going to have enough solar, in particular solar, maybe even wind power in our state to export it to other states. And so having energy storage as another growth area is something I would like to put on the table for further consideration. Thank you for your time. Appreciate all the questions.
Thank you so much, Mayor, for your time. And now we're excited to invite Brad Roos to present with Sustain Rockford.
Thank you very much. And it's good to see Peter again and to also be in the company of another environmental scientist. My background is very similar to yours, Mayor Schwartzman. So I am the president of Sustain Rockford, and Sustain Rockford is a grassroots organization. But my first slide here is one that I pulled off of the Region 1 Planning Council's Resiliency and Sustainability Plan, just to demonstrate that Sustain Rockford is working in collaboration with our own Region 1 Planning Council, which serves a multi-county area. And we've been working on collectively as a community on the resiliency planning for quite some time now, and that plan is ready to be rolled out in 2025. So we're very excited about that. But they deal primarily with governmental entities and benefits to governmental entities. So they would be more interested in being direct recipients of the IRA money and the BIL money, as opposed to a grassroots organization like Sustain Rockford's. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we did early on was to hold a Greentown conference in Rockford. It was the 23rd of this franchise that was held in the Midwest. Next slide, please. And we had a very good experience. It was an all-day conference at the riverfront, Rock River, at the Embassy Suites. Doug Scott, who is our former mayor, was the keynote speaker and is currently the director, as many of you know, of the Illinois Commerce Commission. We had 15 breakout sessions, many of them standing room only, sellout crowd, 160 high school students, and it was overall a low waste event. So no plastic cups, no plastic spoons or forks or paper napkins. Everything was glass and porcelain. No water bottles in plastic, no plastic beverages. All the kitchen scraps were composted, and this is the way we do all of our public events now. The purpose of the conference was to build a public awareness for the importance of sustainability as a holistic, venture. So people, profit, and planet is the way a lot of people look at it. So any community, our country, our state needs to be sustainable as an economic entity. It needs to be sustainable environmentally, and of course, it needs to be sustainable socially. Next step, please. Next, yeah, there we go. So in multiple conversations with the Region 1 Planning Council, as a grassroots organization, the direction that we agreed that Sustain Rockford would be to go for the low-hanging fruit. And the two areas that seemed most important to us were our food waste reduction in general, but especially food waste reduction, and solar. Next, please. And so in terms of composting and so on, we sold composting bins, and that was very successful. Gosh, they went really fast. And we held a number of, and also promoted a number of composting workshops throughout the community for residents and for institutions. One of them was a local charter school, Legacy Academy, that picked up on this. And let me just quickly say that everybody at the administrative level of the school initially thought this will never work. And then it worked beautifully, and then everybody loved it. So, a lot of times it just takes us getting our hands dirty. Next, please. Now we're forming a steering committee for waste reduction in our Rockford region. This is very important because the Winnebago County landfill is the largest landfill in the state. And according to the Region 1 Planning Council's report that was issued in 2022, that landfill has, as of today, only 10 to 12 years left of capacity. We're also taking waste from Chicago area. It's also, therefore, as the largest landfill in the state, it is the largest methane gas producer in the state of Illinois. And that has, greenhouse gas considerations that are very serious. I'm aware of the fact that the Illinois Environmental Council is working diligently to address this sort of problem statewide. And I've met with Liz Kunkel, and I'm really grateful for the work that they're doing. Right now, the Winnebago County administrative staff is very interested in what we're doing with food waste and waste reduction in general. And so they are involved along with a local compost collective called Nettle and a number of citizens. I expect that soon we will have membership from and participation from the city of Rockford, from the Region 1 Planning Council specifically to help us with the data handling and also the U of I extension. Next, please. And then this summer in July on the solar side, we had a conference in July 18th of a solar conference and expo, as you see here. It was the kind of a page grab of the website for the conference. And that conference was also spectacularly successful. Could you provide the next slide, please? But here's what is driving us. This is, I have the gift of providing, stating the obvious, but these, I think, remind me every day of why we do this. This is the atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration as measured by one of the best places in the world to measure atmospheric carbon dioxide, the top of a mountain on Hawaiian's Big Island. And so it is updated on a daily basis. You can actually go to websites and see what that is. And you can see that it's headed in the wrong direction. Next slide, please. And this is the one that really gets me. This is 800,000 years of carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere, and you can see where we are now. The level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere right now is at the catastrophic level. And if we don't fix it, to be candid, we're looking at a mass extinction event of some sort. So it is absolutely essential that we fix this problem. As much as I love programs and doing things, and I've got grandkids, I want to see things happen. This sobers me every time I see it and makes me redouble my efforts. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so just again, to state the obvious, there are 6 sources of energy that go into our electric grid, and 2 of them are coal and natural gas, but the other 4 are all clean energy: nuclear, wind, solar, and hydro. But the problem is that nuclear is very expensive and takes a lot of time. Hydro, the same, and also probably in our state going to be contributing less. Wind is much less expensive than the other 2, but it also takes years to set up. Solar, you can make a call and be on a community solar project today, and or you can have solar on your roof within months. So it is the fastest, and it is the most economical. The thing about solar, however, and I want to touch on this because this is very important, is that the decisions to do all of the other elements, nuclear, coal, natural gas, wind, and hydro, those are all done at the institutional level. Solar primarily is done at the individual level. So education and a navigation assistance with solar is extremely important, and there is very, very little funding for that. So it is a huge gap in what we're doing. We have all these great programs, but if we don't help people understand them and have navigators, they are not understanding it. Every time that I go out and talk with people, I ask, how many of you have solar? And a lot of people, including important community leaders, will say, yeah, I can't have solar because I have trees in the way, or I have a bad roof, or I'm facing the wrong direction, or I rent. And I say, well, what about community solar? And they say, what is that? And these are community leaders. So the education navigation piece is absolutely crucial. Next slide, please. It's complicated. Next slide. We all know that. Here's our goal. The conference, the Solar Conference and Expo, was the pep rally. This is the game. That was the way we set it up, to spark people's interest, and now to actually create a campaign to hit our goals, so that by 2050, 100% of the Rockford region's electricity will come from solar and other clean energy sources. Next slide, please. Skip that. Let's go to the next one. So we are going to be strategic about this, and we're looking at market segments, and these numbers are fictional, but they're not far from what we really will need to do. And I'll show you why in the next slide, but not yet. I just want to say that we understand that there are these market segments: agriculture, industry, commercial, residential, institutional, and not-for-profits, and that approaching each one of those in order to help them get the solar that they need, whether it's rooftop or community solar, they all require separate approaches, and they require trusted messengers, and we understand that. And so that's why we're going to target our messaging to each one of these segments, set goals, and measure results. Next slide, please. So this is information from the Illinois Power Agency. It excludes information from the Illinois Commerce Commission for utility scale solar projects. It also does not include information from the Illinois Solar for All program, but let me just say something about that. And Sustain Rockford was a grassroots educator for the Illinois Solar for All program in the very first cohort, so we understand that program pretty well. On the far left, you'll see that since 2019, which was when we started to feel the impact of the FEJA legislation in Illinois, there have been 2,563 projects done total in the Winnebago County area. When I checked to see how many Illinois Solar for All projects were done in the Rockford region, well, specifically Winnebago County, the answer was 9. 9 projects. 9. One of them was a not-for-profit food bank. One of them was a low-income neighborhood, not-for-profit, not food bank. The other 7 were presumably residential installations. So I think a lot of us understand that the Illinois Solar for All program is wonderful, and I'm a great advocate for it, but it's got problems that need to be solved. You can see, though, that at the far right, maybe not at the far right, the overall economic impact in Winnebago County for solar just through the Illinois Shines program is over $110 million over this period. And the rate of growth of the program is over 100% per year. So it's rapidly growing. Next slide, please. It's important that the Go Solar 815 campaign, although the leadership is being offered by Sustain Rockford, that it be owned by all of us. It needs to be the region's goal. If we don't have that kind of collective impact, as the industry term goes, then it becomes somebody's program, and I hope they do well, but we can't have that. So it needs to be Region 1's goal. It needs to be the City of Rockford's goal, the City of Loves Park, McChesney Park, Winnebago County. It needs to be all of our goals. We need to adopt this, and that's why we're working so hard to be collaborative on this. Next slide for fun. There we go. Nothing is ever perfect. Everything is always on the way to the next thing. I just think this tells the story. When people say, well, do I really need solar and all that, and they don't see the graphs that we showed earlier, a lot of times we forget the fact that, solar isn't perfect either, and neither is hydrogen, and neither are any of the other things, but they're all better than the things that were before. So I think it's worth remembering that that's the kind of thing that we want to be doing. So I think the one thing I guess I want to say, and I want to emphasize again, is that the fact that we are Sustain Rockford is a grassroots organization helping to educate and advocate about waste reduction and solar in the Rockford region. We have no money and no staff. If we'd had an actual event rather than a virtual event, I'd have passed the hat. And so, we're looking for help to find ways to pay for the costs that are naturally occurring for educating and advocating in the community, so to help them understand that there are real benefits that we both can and need to take advantage of. So I'm looking for resources there from any of you, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Brad. And with that, I will pass it over to the USDA Rural Development team and welcome Callie.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Callie Heidbreeder, and I am a business program specialist here with USDA Rural Development, but I also have the opportunity of serving as our energy coordinator as well. So today I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about rural development, what we do, and how the Inflation Reduction Act has impacted the work that we're able to do here in Illinois. Next slide, please. So what is rural development? In a nutshell, rural development, we are an agency that provides loans and grants to promote growth in rural communities. Next slide, please. This is just a breakdown of rural development. So we've got three main program areas: the Rural Business and Cooperative Services area, the Rural Housing Service, and Rural Utilities Service. Today, we'll be primarily focusing in the Rural Business Cooperative Service area. Next slide, please. This is just a map of the state of Illinois. We're broken down into 4 different areas. We have area offices located all throughout the state. So feel free, if you want to reach out to learn more about our programs, you can contact any of our local offices. Also reaching out to us directly, but we've got contacts throughout the entire state. And next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So today, many of you already mentioned the REAP program. It's the Rural Energy for America program. Of course, the government, we love our acronyms, so I will tend to use that quite frequently. So what is REAP? REAP is a grant and loan guarantee program for the installation of renewable energy systems and making energy efficiency improvements. Thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, it has increased the maximum grant amount that we can offer ag producers and rural small businesses. So grants are available for up to 50% of eligible project costs. We can also do loan guarantees through this program. For the loan guarantees, those can cover up to 75% of eligible project costs. So really, there's 3 different options you could look at with REAP. You could do a grant only, you could do a loan guarantee only, or you could do a combined loan grant combination. Regardless, when you're looking at the loan only or the combined loan grant combo, we cannot exceed that 75% of eligible project costs. Again, eligible applicants are ag producers. Those are the individuals who can demonstrate that at least 50% or more of their gross income comes from agricultural operations, and rural small businesses. And the one thing I want to mention about the rural small businesses is they are required to be a for-profit entity. So nonprofits, unfortunately, cannot participate in this program. But as far as rural small businesses, it's a 2-part eligibility criteria. One is ensuring that the business resides in an eligible rural area, which is typically those areas with a population of 50,000 or less. And step 2 would be ensuring that the business falls beneath the size standard for the particular industry in which they're engaged in, as defined by the Small Business Administration. So what that means is SBA has a large list of industries that they've defined, and they have a certain size threshold. It might be a certain number of employees or a certain income level. And as long as the entity falls beneath whatever that size standard is for their industry, and they reside in an eligible rural area, they could potentially be eligible as a small business. Next slide, please. So what are the types of projects? So renewable energy systems, obviously most of us are very familiar with that. So it's those projects where we're creating a renewable energy source: solar, wind, geothermal, anaerobic digesters. Again, the list this is not an all-inclusive list, but just gives you an idea of what we could look at for those renewable energy systems. Next slide, please. For energy efficiency improvements, this is of course not an all-inclusive list either. The main thing that we have to look at with energy efficiency improvements is what we're looking at is we have to be able to see a documented reduction in energy consumption. So basically it's those projects where we're taking an older, less efficient piece of equipment and replacing it with a newer, more efficient model. So, lighting upgrades, HVAC improvements. With our ag producers, we do a lot of grain dryer replacements. We've done some irrigation motor replacements, from diesel to electric. Recently, we've seen some things with hog facilities that are replacing their inefficient heat lamps with the heat mats, things like that, again, where we can see that documented reduction in energy consumption. Next slide, please. So how has the Inflation Reduction Act affected REAP? Well, it provided us with an additional $2 billion over the next decade to invest throughout in over 40,000 farms and small businesses. And there is the breakdown. So it's split between not only REAP, but also providing assistance for underutilized technologies and also technical assistance. Next slide, please. As far as upcoming deadlines, the most recent notice was just published a couple weeks ago, so it's hot off the press. So it was actually a multi-year notice, which is something we don't typically see, but for fiscal year 25, our upcoming grant deadlines are December 31st of 2024 and March 31st of 2025. So if you have somebody who's looking to participate in FY25, their last opportunity to get an application in would be March 31st of 2025. And then those dates do repeat for 26 and 27 as well. Next slide, please. Also, included in the Inflation Reduction Act funding is the Higher Blends Infrastructure Incentive Program, or HBIP. Again, we love our acronyms. What does HBIP do? They provide infrastructure at gas stations to help promote the use of ethanol-based fuel. So what this IRA did for HBIP program is they provide an additional $500 million to hopefully impact 4,000 to 5,000 stations across the country. Next slide, please. This is just a breakdown of what the Inflation Reduction Act looks like here in Congressman Sorensen's district, as well as in Illinois in general. These figures are for covering FY23, 24, and then we did have an HBIP award made here in FY25 already. So those figures do cover a few different, multiple fiscal years there. But as you can see, this is significant investment, significant dollars that we're bringing to Illinois, something that we've not ever seen in the past. I know we are a high demand state. So when I talk to people and I tell them what our allocation has been, they don't think it sounds like a lot, but it's, on a quarterly basis, it's been, almost triple what I had in a year's time to award in the past. And that's just simply at the state level. Much of this funding we've been able to receive comes from the national level as well. So we've been able to bring a lot of success here to Illinois. Next slide, please. As far as contact information, myself is on there, Callie Heidbreeder, and then the rest of our team is on there as well within business programs. You're more than welcome to reach out to us with any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Callie. That's really exceptional information, and thank you for taking time to share it with us today. Next up, we will hear from Joel. So welcome, Joel.
Okay. I'm sorry. I've had some video problems, so you will not be seeing me on this, but anyway, I wanted to get started. Thank you for inviting me. I got a chance to meet Congressman Sorensen at a farm roundtable in Knox County back in February, and had an opportunity to discuss what we were doing. We farm in Knox County, Illinois, and to be honest, I'm not the actual farmer. My brother is. I was a banker for 40 years. And am now helping out here on financing and marketing and other aspects. We farm about 2,200 acres of corn and soybeans, and we have a grain system that's able to dry and store about 120,000 bushels of corn. We did not have a solar installation, as many farms throughout the country do now. And our utility is a cooperative, Corn Belt Energy, and had a program incentivizing people to do it, or at least cooperating. And this was back in 2022, and I spoke with some local farmers here who had solar installations, and many of them had used a company called Solar Up, which was founded in Knoxville, and had a local salesperson, Pete Main, who had a large solar array for his hog operation. And first, I was going to do something for my house, and Pete gave me a bid. It really didn't make sense since I'm only here part of the time, don't use that much power. But he made a bid for a solar array to provide the electricity for the large fans, and also for the electric augers and legs and grain pit for the system. And it seemed to make a lot of sense. And just to run through the numbers for you, and this is not a big system. Yeah, it's let's see, the cost was $75,000. And from that, though, the reimbursements due to the REAP program, which we have received, was a little over $30,000. There's 30% investment tax credit, which is very significant. That was $22,611. Then you depreciate the system. That's a tax benefit of $22,611 also. And the portion that we are still working on receiving is through the Illinois program, and we are, as far as I can tell, we're on our way to receiving that $26,000. That's the SREC, the Solar Renewable Energy Credits, which has to do with the utilities and buying credits. And I thought it'd be helpful if I just went down to you through the dates when things have occurred, and maybe some of the reasons why more people are not participating in the programs or do not know about them. As I said, we first signed up with Solar Up in February 14th of 2023. At the same time, I had been told I had to apply for a SAM ID. Now, SAM is the program how you get money from the government through the Office of Management and Budget. And the SAM, signing up for SAM was rather daunting. And I'm guessing that some people stop right there when you start going through the SAM registration, because it asks a lot of the same questions as if you were General Dynamics instead of a farmer in Western Illinois. So it is somewhat intimidating because, if you don't do this right, you may be subject to fines and jail and so forth. But I made it through the SAM registration and received a SAM ID. Now, along with the SAM ID, suddenly your spam filter becomes filled with unwanted emails from people purporting to be able to help you with the government in this way or that way. And I continue to get those. So that was rather unwelcome. But in SAM, you have to renew that every year if you're going to receive money from the government, because I was told that before my renewal came up this past year. So that I received in February 22nd, 23, my SAM ID. So then the next step was getting someone to write the grant. And I was able, fortunately, to get a grant writer in Mississippi, Project Support Services, who is very helpful. The charge for getting a grant writer is 4% of whatever the grant you receive from the government. So that was about $1,200, and he did not charge it until we received the money, which was just this fall. Next, on March 1st of 2023 to start the SREC for the state. I had to go to a company called Carbon Solutions and hire them, and I believe that was another $1,200 for them. Now they provide everything that's going on in the background for the credits for the solar installation we did that are being bought by utilities. Let's see. Next, in March, then on the 21st, the REAP grant was submitted by Solar Up. Then following that, in April, we got started with Corn Belt Energy, which was another fee, which was not bad. And this all worked out, but we made it by one day because they were changing how you were going to get credited back for the electricity you produce. And we made that on the end of May 31st of 23. The project was signed off on, it was complete, and began producing energy. So we made the net metering 1.0 is what they called. And what that means is that while the system produces electricity throughout the year, we really only use it in September and October, then maybe in January and in the springtime for the electric motors when we're taking the grain out of the bins. So you get credited back and your credits expire after 1 year. So you're never going to receive a check from them. It just reduces your bill. And so it has worked very well that way. So we're saving about $4,000 a year now. So then continuing on into June, we received the USDA request for obligation of funds. And so this was a series more of papers and documents they need, such as tax returns, electric bills, where the other 60% of the money is coming from, or in our case already had came from, the ownership of the land, and then a brief resume of the operation. And this was submitted. And then, let's see, in December of 23, I received word that everything was good. We'd been approved for funding. And this came from Callie's team. Michael Farmer was the young man's name, but he has since left. And it did take some time, though, because they do have a backlog, and I appreciate that. But we did finally receive the funding last month in September. So as I mentioned, now we've received the money for the USDA. I just spoke yesterday with Solar Up concerning the SREC funding. And that is probably going to be 2025. The system is working, and the system has been pretty slick. I have an app on my phone that I'm able to check, and it gives accurate information. It's very interesting when the eclipse occurred in April, watching it go down to zero and then pop right back up. Some other items, though, that I would want to remind people that are doing this: make sure you get a zoning permit from your county, because the county assessors have certainly taken note of the amount of money going into solar installations on farms and other businesses. Let's see. The one thing that I want to really stress, and Mayor Schwartzman touched on this also, is the contractors, and making sure you're dealing with a reputable contractor is extremely important, because while we had a very good experience with our contractor, everything worked. Even our salesman came out and helped just so we could make it under the deadline for the utility. I contacted another friend of mine who was going through the same thing on a much larger project, and he said, it's been a disaster. We were threatened with a lawsuit now. I believe it has to do with interconnection fees with the with utility, because it's easy to rack up some very large charges, I know, with utilities if you're not receiving proper information or don't follow your timeline. So that is certainly something that scares people. And also having worked in banks for 40 years, I'm used to filling out a lot of paperwork and bureaucracy, but my brother would not have done this. He would have said, this is just, I'm not interested in putting myself through this kind of headaches. And I think something that's also missed is that not everybody uses the internet or even has good broadband out in the country. There are many people who continue to operate without using a computer, without using the internet, and think that they're getting along fine, but do not realize that there are significant programs such as these that they can be participating in. So I would encourage the powers that be to make it easy for people to come in. I know that the farm service agencies are set up in a way that it's easy for people to come in and get their work done. Well, this is largely this is outside the farm service agency. Here you're dealing with, as I said, with the Office of Management and Budget for the SAM program. Cali's people were extremely helpful also. But if there's some way to tie it perhaps into the Farm Service Agency, which there is one in every county, I think that would really encourage a lot of people to participate and really make them feel more at ease about coming in and starting the process.
Thank you so much, Joel. I think it's really valuable to hear both the successes and also the challenges that you went through, in practice, going through receiving the REAP grant, and then you mentioned saving annually $4,000, which is incredible. So thank you so much for sharing that story. If there's no questions at this time, we'll go over to our last speaker for the day, Jason Husband with the Natural Resources Conservation Service.
Thank you, Angela. I too share Joel's video issue, so I do apologize for that. As you can see, there's my contact information there. I'm a district conservationist with NRCS, and I service Henry, Mercer, and Rock Island counties. NRCS works with private landowners to provide technical and financial assistance installing conservation practices on their land. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the Inflation Reduction Act and NRCS administered programs. I'm going to briefly touch on these. These are the 4 programs that we as an agency administer and that can utilize IRA funds. And as you can see, and others have said, the federal government loves acronyms, and we do too. So the Conservation Stewardship, Environmental Quality Incentives, Agricultural Conservation Easement, and Regional Conservation Partnership Program are all abbreviated as shown there. Next slide, please. So this is, as the title alludes to, a huge influx of dollars for conservation. I'd like to echo what Callie said with regards to dollars coming into Illinois. As you can see, IRA started to hit NRCS programs in fiscal year 23 and incrementally increase over the next 2 fiscal years, fiscal year 25 that we're currently in. It's about a 10-fold increase. This is happening nationwide. This is just an Illinois example. So in my 28 years that I've worked for NRCS, it's the largest single investment conservation on private lands that I have witnessed. Next slide, please. Some eligible clients and land uses. We partner with our sister agency, the Farm Service Agency, who determines producer and land eligibility. And here you can see some of the land uses that we typically use IRA funds on, and all of the practices and enhancements that are eligible for IRA funding are climate smart or soil health related, such as cover crops, no-till, tree planting, pollinator habitat, and the list gets expanded as we go on. Next slide, please. A little bit about the application process. You can apply in person. Every field office in Illinois is staffed with NRCS and Soil Water District employees that have access to the hard copy of this form that you see there, or you can use the link there highlighted in red to do that remotely and email those in. The sign up is continuous, meaning that you can do that at any time during the year. Next slide, please. There are, however, publicly announced cutoff dates for each program. And what I mean by that is that given time frame, we gather all the applications that we have up to that point in time, and our state office will set out a date and say, we're going to rank and assess these applications and fund them based on priority. All of the practices, like I said, are climate smart. We do all the assessing, planning, ranking with private individuals at the local level here in the field office, and the funding decisions are made at our NRCS state office level. That's all I have.
Is it okay? I'm sorry, it's Lisa.
Hey, Lisa.
Because it was a question about Tic Tacs. And I was just wondering, and I don't know, is it Rhonda? Is that how I say it right?
Randa.
Randa, thanks, Randa. I really appreciated the presentation. And I was curious about, and I can also follow up after, but I was curious about, if you could just characterize a little more your guys' experience or your knowledge of Tic Tacs in terms of, like, you've created a ton of educational content on the YouTube channel and such. But how many, like, organizations are so directly, and I don't know if the right word is clients or what it might be, but like in real life, are you getting a lot of uptake and a lot of requests for technical assistance and support? Is it more sort of basic education, or are people saying, hey, we really want to do this? And then are you seeing the follow through? Like they got assistance and then they applied, and then maybe even they got assistance, applied, and were successful. Like what's the kind of ground game, if you will?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So a lot of it is just basic information, people wanting grant identification, whether or not they're eligible. And as I said in the presentation, we mostly focus on disadvantaged and rural communities, but we try to help everybody. So the way we did that, we divided up our level of help, I guess, into 3 separate tiers. So tier 1 is just like you said, your typical questions. What is the Tic Tac? Eligibility, usually about an hour of technical assistance. And then it moves into the tier 2, which usually that involves not only like maybe helping them with the budget, but helping them, although we don't write grants, we'll go through and help edit it, maybe add in some things that we think might beef it up a little bit. And then tier 3 is really reserved for those disadvantaged communities who really need us to help them through the whole process. So I replied to your direct message, and I do know our metrics. So each quarter we do send off a report to the EPA and DOE. So I could share some of our communities that we've helped. We did have like Carrier Mills attended our Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities webinar, and then followed up with an intake form, and we have helped them now successfully submit their pre-application. So we're still in the very beginning of helping people access these grants, but we have seen follow through.
Thank you so much. That's super helpful.
Yeah, and of course, feel free to message me offline too, and we can connect over this again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that question, Lisa. It looks like we now do have a couple questions in the chat as well. Pat asks if we can see a link to the mayor's FAQs. I think he had to drop off, but we can certainly reach out to him to ask if that's something that we can share with everyone in our follow-up email to this event. And then we have a question from Kay. Did I hear that ethanol is able to receive government funding? I thought ethanol was a negative environmental use. Are any of our presenters able to respond to that question?
I think she probably heard it during, this is Callie. I think she heard it during my presentation. It was actually in regards to the Higher Blends Infrastructure Incentive Program. So what that is to encourage ethanol, the installation of, to enhance the fuel pumps at local gas stations to encourage the use of ethanol-based fuels and to create that availability. So it's It's through the Higher Blends Infrastructure Incentive Program. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Callie. Any other questions from folks still on the line? All right, seeing and hearing none, so I'll hand it over to Angela to close us out. But thank you so much for your great questions, and we will be sure to follow up with them as well.
Thank you everyone so much for joining our Inflation Reduction Act workshop today. Thank you again to all of our amazing speakers and our collaborators in making this event happen, Congressman Eric Sorensen and his team, to Senator Halpin for joining us today as well. Have a great day. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. This was great. Thank you.
And thank you very much to